Welcome to the Ask a Matchmaker podcast. I'm your host, Matchmaker Maria. For over a decade, I have combined 4 generations of family matchmaking tradition with modern relationship psychology, behavioral science, and dating trends. With this unique expertise, I answer your dating and relationship questions on the podcast and online. If you're not already following me, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Matchmaker Maria. And hey, while you're at it, follow this podcast, Ask a Matchmaker, or my company at Copy Match. All that good stuff is there. This week's guest is Carrick Brunson. Paul is a serial entrepreneur, television host, and columnist whose specialty lies in teaching others. He's an internationally recognized expert in interpersonal relationships and communication. I'll add that in there too myself. Personal development and entrepreneurship. He currently serves as a featured business columnist for USA Today. He's the co-host of UK's Selebs Dating television show and the co-host of UK's Married at First Sight and the host of the Better with Paul live podcast. Go subscribe to his podcast, Better with Paul. It's great. The heart of his work is centered on impacting lives through mentorship and developing a new generation of servant leaders with a desire to change the world. Paul is the founder and chair of Give, Love, Build Hope, a nonprofit organization dedicated to transforming schools in rural areas of the Caribbean. He's a proud second-generation son of Jamaica, and Paul's greatest achievements are in his roles as a husband and father. When he's not serving the world, he's serving his family, likely with a red stripe beer in one hand and a good book on the other. Welcome to the Ask a Matchmaker podcast, Paul.
Maria, what's up? This is so very exciting. I have to say, right out the gate, it is great to see you. Like, genuinely, I think a lot of people jump onto these podcasts and they're like, "Oh, it's so nice to see." But honestly, it's great to see you because I have so much respect for you. And on top of it, I think what you do it flawlessly. And so it's just great to be here with you.
This means a lot to me. Thank you so much, Paul. So for those of you who might not know other parts of Paul, are you used to be, I don't know what the right tense is, a matchmaker?
Yeah, I play one on TV.
You play one on TV, but you know, that's how, yeah. Paul and I met 13 years ago. It's been that long.
Was it 13 years? Really, was it 13 years?
Because it's 2022 and I met you in 2009.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean,
didn't even have kids.
I definitely was.
We both didn't have kids.
No. Life was so good, wasn't it? It was so good.
It was so good because it's so funny that I love that I'm talking to you today because I keep thinking about, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a little popular on TikTok. I like review people's online dating profiles. It's like a whole thing.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
And I shout out to all of the listeners who are coming from that place. And I keep thinking about like how like this is such a weird place that my career has entered where it's like I didn't do profile reviews 10 years ago. Like no one would even show your online dating profile. Now it's like I have people who are executives at Facebook who like just let me publicly critique their profile online.
Wow.
And you can see where they work. You can see their name. It's like, wow, that's crazy to me. And it made me think of you because I remember in 2009, the big thing then was the events. Do you remember we used to do?
Oh, yes. Yeah. You're bringing it back. Yes.
You had these really cool. So you were hosting events and I was hosting events. My events were it was called Dinner with Strangers. So it was like 10 women, 10 men, dinner with strangers, whatever. Right. And then you had, what was it? Flow? What was it?
Flow dating.
Right.
Flow dating. Yeah. Which was
I just lost like 5 brain cells remembering that. I just want you to know.
Oh my God. This is good. Because it was basically speed dating, but it was set to music, right? So it was 4 minutes, you in front of someone else, and I would pose a question. And it could be something fun like, give the best, back massage that you've ever given in your life, right? Or it could be something political, like, hey, who did you vote for in the last election? And then there's 4 minutes to do whatever you do. And then music actually was the intersection, if you will. Right. And then people would dance their way. They would flow their way to the next date.
I love seeing whenever you would post photos, I would just get so excited because you could tell like it was just very different. And I feel like you were answering. I mean, this was centered around the Black community, and I feel like you were catering, like you were giving this like underserved demographic an opportunity to like socialize and meet new people. That's not, I don't know. I'm Greek, and I feel like Jamaicans and Greeks have the same kinds of moms. And
yes, yeah.
So like, so much of our socialization is like with our own community, church, backyard, in the living room, like family focused. And then you were giving this opportunity for people to like extend their network through your matchmaking network.
Absolutely.
Which was
and
so
can I
different.
say, I went to my first Greek wedding not too long ago here in London, and it was like next level. Like it was next level. There was like 5,000 people, and that was like at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it was like another 5,000 people came. No,
and what did you think of like, did you go to the ceremony?
Yes, I sure did.
So the people in my religion, the people that the church believes that whoever introduced or whoever was the influence on your life that is going to be the official witness, they are now officially related to you. And because to become baptized, you have to have the oil. Oil is thicker than blood. So your chosen family is more important than your biological family after a wedding. Wow. You know what? I did not pick that up. But can I tell you what I did pick up? Go ahead. In the ceremony? And I don't know if this is throughout, but this was in a Greek Orthodox church that we went to. So I heard basically there was pressure being placed on the bride to give birth. Like it was pressure that I've never heard in my life. It was like you will become fruitful. You will. Was it English? Okay.
Well, it was part. Yeah, in part it was. But I'd never heard that before. Like there was a heavy emphasis on you will have children. I've never seen that before. It was fascinating. I've never thought about that. As someone who has had a Greek wedding in Greece, which is a whole other level, because Greek weddings in Greece start at 6 p.m. 7 p.m. is usually the earliest someone will get married because there's siesta before 5 p.m. So you're not allowed to get married certain hours. So the reception's at 7 p.m. The ceremony's at 7 p.m. Your party starts at 9 p.m. and it goes until 6 a.m. Oh my God. You know what? I was wondering. So it was the same thing here. Okay. And it was on a Sunday, and I was working on Monday. So I was thinking this is 2 a.m. Yeah. Those would end at 1, 2 a.m. But yeah, that's why. Like, so very rare. I don't think I've ever been invited to a wedding before 6 p.m. in Greece. I don't know how it is in London. It's funny. The thing you should know is that, I guess if we're talking about Greek Orthodox weddings, is, a lot of what Greek Orthodox see, like a lot of the Bible, that part is in ancient Greek. So most Greek people speak modern Greek. It's kind of like Latin versus, modern Italian. So I never thought about like what's being said, but a lot of what Greek Orthodox sees like symbolism in culture. So sometimes it's not necessarily about fruitful and having kids. It's about fruitful and like being a part of, I think, the community and like providing for the community. Like this sort of, you're expected to help others. We have this word called philotimo, which is like the welcoming of others. And that's, I think that is the promotion in our religion, is like, you have to be philotimo. That's like our cultural thing. Like, if you ever meet a Greek person, they're like, come over, sleep on my bed. Here's the food. So like I said, Jamaicans and Greeks, very similar. Very similar. Very similar. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to, before we start talking about like all of the really great stuff that you are well known, at least in my inner circle, I would love to know more about SelebsGo Dating and Married at First Sight. Like, okay, so Married at First Sight, we know. I've had a few people from Married at First Sight as guests, not in the UK version, the US. But SelebsGo Dating, tell me more, because I can't watch it here. Yeah, it's a wild concept. It's coming to the United States. In two versions. One is there's talk of a U.S. version of SelebsGo Dating, and then there's and then they're going to, I think, license the UK version to the U.S. this year, 2022. It's a wild. It's I can't even say it's a wild concept. It's an interesting concept, because I think a lot of us are interested in the lives of celebrities, that whole voyeurism. And so what this show is it's celebrities from the UK, from all walks of life. So of course you have reality celebrities in there. You have TV presenters, you have famous authors, famous, we always have someone from a musician, like a boy band, like a 90s boy band. You know what I mean?
Love that.
So it's about 8, 9 of them. And what they're doing is they're participating in a dating agency. Now, the dating agency is like a Big Brother house. No cameras inside, no camera people, should I say, inside, but it's embedded cameras, 100+ embedded cameras all over this townhouse, this row home in London. And there's a receptionist who's one of my best friends, Tom Reed Wilson. And these celebrities come into the agency. And what we're doing, myself and my co-host, Anna Williamson, is we're helping these celebrities to learn how to date, because many of them have not had to date. You know what I mean? And we set them up on dates, and this goes on for about 3 months, and it's hilarious. It's fun, and but it's impactful.
Wait. They're living like a Big Brother style for 3 months?
Well, okay. So let me back up. There's 2 versions of this. This show is a big format. So there's 2 versions. One is called the mansion version, and that's where they move into a mansion, and we set up the agency in a mansion. And in that version, they live for, it's more like 45 days is what they're living in a Big Brother style house. And in that version, we invite the datees to live in the house with the celebrities, but they live in different quarters.
This is giving me so much trust right now.
Oh my God, it's crazy. And then there's the traditional format, which is where we have a separate agency. They go home in the evenings, but then they come in during the day and they spend the day with us, like at an office. So they'll spend a few hours with us at the agency there.
So in SelfGo Dating, it's not like The Bachelor where it's 20 women and 1 man. This is like a co-ed space. So it's like, it seems like it's half men, half women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's roughly, depending on sexuality.
Right.
It definitely ranges, but it is not a all for one, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It's
no one's competing. Is the
not at all.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, I have a few follow-up questions. And I don't know if this relates to SelfGo Dating, but it does relate to you being, a dating expert in you're a new adopted home in the UK. Listen, if you're not following Paul C. Brunson on Instagram, I absolutely love it when he takes his family on trips around Europe, because you just learn so much about the unseen history of certain cities and countries. Much of it funded by the Atlantic slave trade that nobody talks about.
Yes, but, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. You know.
Yes. So let me ask you a question then. When it comes to do you see a difference in and this is specific to the UK, do you see a difference in dating by class? First of all, do you see a class system? Because I feel like when I go there, I see it. But maybe I am overreacting. Oh my, no.
This is, the best way for me to answer this is my boys. We've just put my 2 boys. We were homeschooling them for 3 years.
Your
and
sons,
we just we just put them in school in a British system for the first time. And one is what's called year 6, which is the equivalent to 5th grade in the United States. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And already you can see how how they've begun to break them into basically the class system. This country is really predicated around class. This country being the UK, and so you see it everywhere. Every corner is based on class, and what I find fascinating is that structure is holding tight. I don't see it being dismantled anytime in the near future.
How are your sons? Is their class now? And I say this with respect. I just want to know, is your son being classed because he's black, because he's American, because he has American parents, or because his parents, you do make a good income? Like what class are we putting, or do all of these take for account to where your son is placed among his peers?
Great question. So let's talk about the history of the system. So I've researched this quite a bit. So the history of class comes from proximity to the royal family, right?
Okay, so you're at the bottom.
Yeah. You don't know. No. But yeah, it's like, so that's where it comes from. Right.
Okay.
So it's obviously like if you're the brother of the queen, right? And then it goes down: cousin, second cousin, right? Friend,
So if someone from the royal family goes to your son's school, does that like bump your son up?
So this was the history. This was the history. This is where it's come from.
Okay.
Now, where it's gone it is about, in my opinion, it is about social capital. That's where the system is today. It's about social capital. So, for example, if you are on a television show, you have social capital. If you are a star athlete, you have social capital. If you're an executive in a company, you have social capital. And so therefore you are then elevated to a higher level of class, if you will, right? And then as that social capital shrinks, so does your placement on that class totem pole. So that's where it's gone. It's moved to social capital. And what's interesting to me about the UK versus the US is, the UK didn't go through a civil rights movement, but
That's
clearly
my next question. Like, what is the core difference that you see?
The way that I look at it is that class structure that I talked about, it's all about social capital. There's a ceiling.
I see.
And then it becomes about proximity to the royal family. You know what I mean?
See. Okay.
So it's like there's a ceiling. Whereas in the U.S., I truly feel like you can basically achieve anything or I shouldn't say you can achieve anything that you want to achieve, but there is the opportunity for you to do that in the United States.
Perceived meritocracy, I think, in the U.S.
Yeah, I'm with that. I mean,
look, there's obviously ceilings for a lot of people, and there's also people born into privilege, I think, in the United States, where that meritocracy, if you are a singer who grew up with very wealthy parents, where you didn't have to like wait tables and you could 100% focus on your craft, then you could still be the best singer and win all the Grammys. I'm not speaking about anyone specifically, but I know people are thinking about at least one person. I'm not talking about her, but she could win all the Grammys, but there's still privilege in how she was able to, lift herself up, right? So, but there is still this, I think, meritocracy. That I think in the United States, when you see stuff, people like, this is not a political statement, but when you see someone like President Obama, raised by a single mother who, to become president of the United States, like, to me, that's like, wow, that's a lot of mobility. Whereas I feel like every time I see a prime minister of the United States, they all went to the same college.
Right. Oh, you're saying UK, or you're saying
sorry,
US?
Yes. Sorry, I meant the UK. Excuse me. Like
UK,
the British prime minister.
No. Yeah. No. Definitely, there's a ceiling here. And that ceiling I don't see being dismantled anytime soon, although the forces are at play to try to dismantle that actively.
I get this question a lot. Every Wednesday I do Ask a Matchmaker, and people know that I've lived parts of my life in Greece, obviously most of my life in the US, and I've traveled all over Europe, and they'll ask me sometimes like, what do you think the cultural differences are between Europe or in the US? And I'm like, Europe's such a big country. Even the culture of dating shifts, on a fundamental level across the United States, right? And like New York dating is incredibly different to Philadelphia dating. And for those wondering, Philadelphia is like a wolf pack. Like you have a leader of the group and the guy, and then whatever he wants to do, that's what the rest of the pack does. And it's like very twisted. Whereas in New York, it's like all these independent people that don't tell each other anything. So it's always interesting to get these questions and finally have someone who's, has the US experience and is now living the UK experience of dating. I recently had a client ask me about who, based on my temperament, who should I be looking for in London? She lives in London. And I said to her, she's emigrated to London. She's, originally from, let's call it mainland Europe. like the bottom
Okay.
of the Europe, right? And I said to her, for your specific temperament, I would avoid the English and go straight for the Scottish. Like, I feel like Scottish people who like live in London, that's just been my experience. They're just like a different, it's kind of like, they're kind of like the people from the mainland. Like, they have a lot to prove. At least that's, the energy. And it's like, this makes sense to me. Like, I feel like you would do really well with Scottish people.
Yeah, well, on that note, a lot of people don't realize that, the UK is made up of multiple countries, right?
Yeah.
And on top of the multiple countries, right, if you're just looking at England, within England, there are 42, what's categorized as 42 different accents.
Right.
And the accents, what I find fascinating is that the accents are a derivative of where you basically live, like where you were, where you were born. And what's fascinating is that you could be within 2 miles of each other here and have a completely different accent. But the accent really identifies your character. So people are stereotyped based on accent. So it's interesting. So, if you have a Scottish accent, people ascribe, Scottish stereotypes to you, which by the way, I am Scottish. I found that out, DNA, from the Highlands of Scotland. Yes.
I've been
rock a
seeing
kilt.
the tartan like lately. The kilt. That's pretty cool. Didn't one of your fans draw you too? Like, did I see something? You got some artwork?
Yeah. So some folks,
cool.
I'm repping that hard, and I've visited the Highlands, and just adore it. So there's, and it's even in Scotland, like folks in the Highlands are ascribed different stereotypes than people a little bit lower, geographically lower. But in England, 42 different accents. So because of that, there are a multitude of stereotypes, and that's what I find interesting. So you think about that. 42 different accents just within one country. And then you have ethnicity built into that, right? Because folks coming over, then you have, socioeconomic built into that. It's just, it's a wild place. Wild place for matchmaking.
Since we're talking about accents, right? Like, okay, so actually we're talking about dialects. So like when I go to, for instance, if I were to speak to someone in Greece, there's probably about 40 dialects in Greece as well.
Okay.
Many islands have, like, my husband and I speak very different dialects. And, he's Cretan. So, I've learned to say certain words the way he says them. But he's also adapted to the Athenian that I'm speaking. But in the Greece, when you meet someone with a dialect, it's not even, maybe you'll make, like, if someone is from Thessaloniki, where they, instead of saying la la la, they say la la la, you might make fun of them the first time, like, oh, la la la, like that. But that's it. That's the end of it. You will still date. There's no class structure there. No one thinks, like, my mom comes from an island where when people talk, they kind of sing. That's just how a lot of people from islands speak. And it would never be a reason not to date someone. Whereas I feel like, and I'm gonna tell you where I've received this feedback. I've seen this on your stories like a year ago when you asked, I don't know if they weren't Black Americans, but I think most people responding happened to be Black British. Is that the right term?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Black British. Yes.
Okay. And they were saying about how their accent will take away like job opportunities from them. Or do you remember this? This is your story.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all British.
It was all British. Okay.
All British. Yeah. So for example, there's an area. So in London, there's one suburb of London called Essex. Essex is considered to be working class, hardworking, that kind of thing. There's a particular accent, Essex accent. If you have that Essex accent and you're trying to go downtown to Canary Wharf in London and get a finance job, you will typically be denied. And that's something that is real.
How does that work in dating? Like, same. So that's so interesting. One of the things, the last time I was in London, a few years ago before the pandemic, I was at this bar with a mutual friend of ours. And there was a gentleman there, and he was like, "What are you doing in here?" Kind of like not accusatory. He was just like, "What are you doing in here?" And I was like, "Well, I'm, this and, whatever." And he was telling me that he was very upset from a previous bar he was at, and he just wanted to make sure he's at the right bar. And I was like, "Well, what happened at the previous bar?" And he goes, "Well, we got kicked out because we're tradies, and that was a finance or something." He said something, but he got kicked out for being in the trades. And I was like, "What?" Like that just seems so foreign to me when he said that, because I've never experienced that. Personally, I've never experienced that, but also like I didn't know I was alive. I was old enough to experience, like you could tell me like if Maria lived in the 50s, then I would have seen in the South, and I would have seen Black people denied access to like certain amenities, restaurants, venues, bathrooms. But this took place in a different country, a very diverse city. London is one of the most diverse cities in the world.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So that was just really shocking to me.
Yeah, it is absolutely fascinating to me. Let's call it discrimination. That happens based on that, and this is something that all Brits are facing, and there are other, I think, distinct differences between UK dating and US dating. For example, there's a heavy, and I'm sure you know about this. I mean, there's a heavy drinking culture here. But
it ends early.
The UK.
It ends early.
Where does it end?
They drink earlier. It ends earlier. What I'm saying is like the bars there shut down early compared to.
Yes. Well, you know what? You know why? It's all about money. So I've learned this now. So the bars shut down typically at 11 p.m.
Right.
However, that's for two reasons. One is because there's a private club culture here. Almost everyone, is a member of the Soho House or whatever, your private club that can go on forever. But then also, almost all these pubs, they do lock-ins.
Okay.
Right. So at 11 o'clock, if you're at a cool pub or whatever, they'll look around and it'll be 20, 30 people in there. They'll lock the door, and at that point, it becomes a private event, right? And everyone just continues drinking. I
didn't know that.
So
what were you going to say about the drinking culture?
Yeah, so the drinking culture, much different. So in the U.S., what I've noticed is that you go on a date, let's say, and you're having a couple of drinks. You'll have a few drinks over the course of the date. And as the date is developing, right, you may increase your consumption or decrease your consumption, right? You're doing that over the course. Here, what happens is two people sit down. They're so nervous, they start binge drinking immediately. It's like shot, immediately binge drinking. And then the date begins. You know what I mean? And that's not everyone, but that is a lot of the dating. And these nuances I find to be fascinating.
In Greece, it's like the complete opposite when it comes to dating. First of all, when you have alcohol, you're expected to eat meat, just to not have an empty stomach. And even the very popular thing to eat after going out drinking is intestine soup at 2 a.m. Did you have that when you were in Crete?
What, I didn't have that in Crete. I had that in Turkey.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time at Yeah, very much so.
So, culture is a social construct. Anyway, there was a very, I remember I was in Greece and I came back and someone's like, "Oh, did you get drunk?" This was before I turned 21. Because there, you can drink, when you're younger. And I had come back to visit some friends and "Do you get drunk?" And I go, "No, when you go out, you just have 2 drinks maximum. And that one drink is supposed to last you for an hour. People will nurse a drink in Greece. And
it's a long time to nurse it.
Even a coffee, we have a coffee culture in Greece, and when you drink a coffee, the expectation is that that's going to take 40 minutes to drink. Right? There's no there's no espresso, none of that. Even when they serve that, you're expected to drink it slowly. So, a typical, if you sit at a table and you only order 2 drinks, the expectation from the owner of the venue is you'll be there for 2 hours.
Wow.
Right?
Fascinating.
No one's taking you out, right? So it's very interesting whenever Greek people go to England the first time, they come back and they're just like, whoa, it's a very different culture. But also, I remember I lived in Greece when Greece, Athens hosted Champions League, I think in 2006. And who was it? Was it Man U that came? Manchester United was,
Manchester.
I think, yeah. And I remember like Greece had put PSAs like, if you see a British person, do not like
do not engage.
Drinking, do not engage. Like, because we're not used, because people drink so slowly in Greece. You don't throw up, right? There's no one's being messy at night. And so even on vacation, there are actual British villages like Zakynthos, Rhodes, Crete. They have little villages just for British people to have their fun without really interacting with the other population. So it's very interesting because they know. Sense. And they know
this
because
makes
it's
sense.
Dangerous if people are very drunk and they're walking in the middle of the road. Like, they don't want anyone getting hurt or whatever. It's just this is accommodating of culture, and I think it's pretty interesting.
That's But that, by the way, that's fascinating.
So cool.
That's fascinating to me. Yeah.
I love this. And what's it like? Well, let's now take it back to you for a second. You're second generation Jamaican. What's dating like in Jamaica?
It's non-existent. It's terrible. It's terrible. I will say that I think economics plays a huge role in how we date. Jamaica is hardcore third world country. Unfortunately, there is no middle class. There's a very few number of very wealthy, and the vast majority of the country is poor. And so, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to have just a full meal the next day, dating becomes, close to impossible. The birth rate, as I'm sure you're tracking, is way down in many of these places. So it's hard. It's really hard in Jamaica.
Do you find that that's the case for many countries in the Caribbean?
Yeah. It's worldwide. I think we're at what I would call an inflection point, and unfortunately, I haven't seen enough. And I don't know if anyone is really doing this research around connecting where we sit economically with how we're engaging, whether it is short versus long-term mating. So. And I think there's a massive impact that economics plays, because whenever I look at research, the data on higher socioeconomic, so we'll call it high socioeconomic dating, that data always looks substantially different than lower socioeconomic dating, whether that be divorce rates and marriage rates or, satisfaction rates, birth rates, right? The whole thing. And so then you think, okay, if that's the case, which that is, those are facts, then you look at, oh my God, well, the middle class is just being obliterated around the world. We have super wealthy, getting wealthier and wealthier, and poor, getting poor. So what does that do to dating culture? And that's something that really needs to be investigated.
I have a thought here.
Okay.
So, you mentioned, Jamaica, third world country, struggle. You're talking about survival mode here, right? So can dating exist under the umbrella of survival? And, immediately, maybe this is just my temperament. Whenever I hear a problem, I try to find a similar problem and think how they solved it. So I know that my grandmother and my great grandmother, they've told, we can see it's not that far along. It's not that far away when, Greece went through World War II. They went through their own, there was a time when the Nazis were taking all the food. And so, I don't want to say numbers. I think it's 1 million, but I don't want to say numbers. Greeks, not necessarily Greek Jews, but Greek people died because of hunger, right? And this is back in the 40s, not even 100 years ago. And at that time, I think about, my grandmother, she is from what is now, because the borders have changed, she's from what is now northern Turkey. And she came at 4, there was let's call it a genocide. There was a genocide that took place, and, populations were exchanged in different places, right? So, so she came to Greece when she was 4, and so did my grandfather. He was 15. They had an arranged marriage. Mm-hmm. And most people in that time period where they're going through World War I, World War II, Greece had its own civil war. Then we had a junta, so much of survival mode, where's our next food coming? women dying from childbirth, 1 in 5 women, that's like a global statistic. You have this thing, and it's like, how much of that was arranged marriage? So there's like, is there room for romance when you're in a survival instinct? Right.
No. This is a brilliant topic, because, and I've begun to look at this, I'm sure you're a big fan of Esther Perel,
yes,
right?
Of course.
And I always find it fascinating when she talks about her parents going through the Holocaust and how, from her perspective, there was no time for romance because we were just trying to survive. And I remember reading something from David Buss at one point, and he was talking about how, and I could see this, right, where when we're in survival mode, what we do is we shift from not anyone, but many of us who are thinking about long-term mating, right? Because if you have resources, you think more long-term. Right? You think about, okay, you could plan, you have space to plan, etc. But when you don't have resources, you think short term. So therefore, the economy change is changing our end goal. So we're moving from long-term dating to short-term mating, right? Which is different, right? That's quick sex.
Totally
That's
different.
In and out of relationships. It's totally different. And I really feel like there's a massive shift towards this, and it's being driven by economics. I really feel this way, and to me, it's quite honestly, it's scary. I'm very scared of what the future of the world looks like as we begin to shift, our mating desires as a result of economics.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, in our next lives, Paul, we'll have time to do these PhD theses or something, because, I think you and we come up with all these like questions all day, and it's like, who's going to have time to do all this research?
Right. True indeed.
So one of the things that I love about you, Paul, especially on your Instagram, is that you're very public about your own goal setting. My favorite posts that you put up are like when you show me how many, not only how many books you read, but like the books that you're reading, or how, you do these listicles sometimes. You don't do it often enough. You should do it more. But like when you say like the 10 things that make my marriage work, I think you've done that once.
Yeah.
Where you do these things, and it's like so much of it is like when you read these lists, it's not like, oh, I appreciate an honest partner. It's actually like really actionable items towards a goal. Like my goal is to be in a happy, healthy relationship. Here are the 10 things that I'm doing to get there. But I would love to know a little bit more about like, now that we just mentioned all these things, right? We talked about class. We talked about dating.
Yes.
We talked about not only the economics of dating, but the economics of romance.
Yes.
Where do you find when we talk about like obstacles that we live in life, and it doesn't have to be as severe as like living in a third world country where you don't know where your next week's meal is coming, but even as simple as like helping yourself meet your goals and passions. Because I don't know about you, but one of the things that frustrate me on social media, there's many things that frustrate me, but one of the big things is that there are influencers who come out and say, well, if you woke up at 4:30 a.m. you could do this, or if you just set your mind to it, you could do this. And it's like, it doesn't take into account reality. It doesn't take into account privilege. I remember there was this one, he's a pretty big media influencer. And, he mentioned like, I wake up at 5 a.m., Maria, what is your excuse? Like, this was like a personal attack to me. And I said to him, like, you're a single dad. You don't have your kid 4 days a week. Like, it's different when you don't have to wake up with a foot in your face in bed. It's just different.
Very different. Very different. Yeah, very different. I think a lot of that is just BS. I think a lot of people are out here fronting and being fraudulent. And I tell you, we've been around a little bit, and it's fascinating to me to look at, maybe some of our even contemporaries who came into the game 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and, what they may have done or not done over the decade and change. And a lot of that to me is based on how they actually execute. I think there's a lot of hyperbole, there's a lot of noise, but not enough signal, right? And it's all about execution at the end of the day. It's all about execution. And it's not about having to execute on 12 different things. It's about picking 1, 2, 3 things that you're very passionate about and being willing and disciplined enough to sacrifice, for those things. And for example is, I think it's very important for us all to know our values. What are the things that we value most? I think that's the very important exercise. For me, top of the pyramid is family at the end of the day. And so what I've done and what my wife has done is we've restructured our life around that, right? And that means a lot of sacrifices. That meant at one point pulling our kids out of school to homeschool them, where that was pre-COVID when it wasn't cool to homeschool, right? And everyone was like, you're crazy for homeschooling. We're like, no. We need to do this in order to keep the family structure intact because this is the most important thing for us. So I think it's just very important at the end of the day, identify the values, be willing, disciplined, and sacrifice. And then it's about execution, and consistently executing on those.
Let's break this down for a second. So you talked about values, right? How do you go about defining your own values?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's having an honest look at where you spend your time and money.
Oh my God,
right?
me too. I think the exact same thing.
Yeah. Because that's really what you value.
Words out of my mouth. That's like literally what I was thinking. That's so
yes,
funny.
that's really because it's funny, especially that's your lifestyle. I remember all the time in matchmaking, I would people would say, I'm the most religious person in the world. It's all about God for me. When was the last time you were in church? When was the last time you did so think about where you spend time, and your money. Build out that list, and you can even test it, right? Because whatever you're feeding, if it's a value, you're becoming happier. Self-esteem is boosting, right? You're feeling good, right? And so test those things, identify what those values are, the top ones, and then figure out how you could begin to tweak your life. Right. So that you are disproportionately now spending more time and energy on those things. And you'll just be happier. You'll just be a lot happier.
One of my favorite, and I will share my answer and I want to hear yours too, but one of my most favorite first date questions is, your boss buys you a scratch off ticket. After taxes, you get to take home $1 million. What do you do with the money? I would love to hear your answer, because here's what I've learned. How people answer this question tells you so much about their values. And then as the opposite person, you can decide, do I fit in this? Do I agree with this? Do I want to keep going on a date with this person? Maybe it's not exactly what you would say, but it's at least complementary to how you think. But do you have an answer for this?
I would invest all of it in Tesla. I would invest all of it. I would split it between Tesla and Apple stock, I think. And in a year from now, I'd come back and say, look at the 6 million that I have. Okay.
So do you think you and your wife, so what you're describing, I feel like, is generational wealth that you're establishing, at least. Do you think you and your wife have that? Do you share that value system?
100%. She would say, double down on that, make it happen. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
totally.
So let me tell you my answer. And I remember telling this to my husband, and my husband said that because of my answer, he was like, yeah, I'm going to marry her.
Okay.
So if I got to take home $1 million, the first thing I would do is I would give maybe 20% back to my boss. Just as thank you so much for buying me this scratch off ticket. I really appreciate it. Here you go. Because that's what I would want. I always think about what would I want in this scenario, right? So that's what I would do. Yes. The second thing I would do is I would pay off both me and my sister's student loans. I know it's a massive source of anxiety for both of us. There's no wrong answer here. I'm just telling you what I would answer, right? The third thing I would do is build 6 education trusts. One for each of my kids. And then between me and my husband, we have 4 nieces and nephews, right? My sister has 2 kids. His sister has 2 kids. So all 6 kids would get an education trust of let's say $100,000. And that's the end. Boom. And I know that other people will say, oh, what about generational wealth? Or what about, I get it. I totally understand that. But to me, it's family first. and get rid of the anxiety, the stress of like education. And like now I can give my children an opportunity where they don't have to think about, because I remember when I went to college, one of the reasons that I chose the college that I chose was because they gave me a scholarship. It was not necessarily the first school I wanted to go to, but I didn't have money. My parents did not have enough money for me to go to Syracuse University. So, you know,
Yes.
you kind of
Yes.
think it's, but listen, your answer works for you and your spouse, and my answer works for me and my spouse, right? And I think that look at how we just answered this question without thought, right? It's like a quick,
Right.
and I love that you can learn so much about a person in that one question.
Yeah, you really can, because you know what's interesting when you ask me that, I've never heard that question before. When you ask that question, immediately what I thought is, well, you know, it's going to be based on circumstance, right? Because you know, if you're Jeffrey Bezos answering that question, it's different. You know, if you know, so immediately that's what I thought. But then I thought, you know, well, that's what's brilliant about the question.
Yeah.
Because it suggests circumstance. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think it's a great question. It's a great
Absolutely.
question.
I mean, and also like, you know, I think it's exactly what it is. It's circumstance. It's like, where are you in life? I think if a person is dating at 24, where they might not have hit their income potential or aspirational, you know, where they want to be, that answer is going to be very different. And then, of course, if you already have $1 million in the bank, like you said, Jeff Bezos doesn't have to be that. He doesn't have to be the wealthiest person in the world. But like you know, my sister and I, we have a girlfriend who, when we asked her this question, it's my most favorite question. She said, I would take all that money and buy a building downtown, like in Greece, right? And she would just collect rents from this building. She would have 18 apartments and she would just collect rent. She's like, now I have an income every month. Like, that's what her thought was. And I was just like, wow, that's really risky to me. Like, to me, owning a building seems really risky. I don't want, that's more stress in my life. So it's, you know, it's very different relationships to this question. I think it's a really good one. Okay, so we had values, and then.
Yes. Well, I have to go back to this question.
Okay.
This is such a good question. Is you were saying that felt risky to you.
Yeah.
I have found through matchmaking that the two areas that best predicted whether or not a couple would work, right? Mm-hmm. Outside of physical attraction, you know, initially, was emotional stability, but also risk adversity. So risk is incredible, right? So you have to be willing to tolerate the same level of risk as your partner. And this is why I keep going back. That's such a brilliant question. Oh my God, I'm going to use this question. This is really good because risk tolerance is incredibly important, and we don't spend enough time looking at it.
I think in fact with risk, I think the way you assess risk, and you know, there has to be a balance between partners, right? Your partner's not going to be a carbon. Like I say this as an entrepreneur, right? I take a lot of risk having my own business. Having employees and payroll and all that stuff, right? Like there's a massive risk in the service industry and whatever. And I'm with someone who's, you know, has a stable. He has a corporate job, right? Which comes with other benefits that I just can't provide for myself as an entrepreneur. But when I look at risk, I think the way I talk to my husband about things that I want to do, it's like we kind of conversate about the balance that we need. And I feel like in other couples that I've seen, especially when people ask me, do you think two entrepreneurs could be together? And it's like, well, in most cases, no, because if one is way more risky than the other, then there's this resentment, there's this competition. I know what I'm saying is very unpopular, but it's just something that I've seen that like some entrepreneurs, they need to be balanced a little bit.
I agree with you.
You know, and it's very interesting to see like how much of emotional compatibility can be completely challenged when someone starts growing resentful of their partner. Oh, you didn't allow me to do this opportunity. Imagine what I could have been if you weren't the obstacle in front of me. How many couples do we know where they're like, should have invested this and this, but you said no. Like I hear this all the time about Apple stock. Oh, I could have put $5,000 on Apple stock in 1995, but you didn't let me. Okay. You know,
right.
That might have been, you know, your rent for that month. So I don't know, you know, what the situation is.
Yeah, no, that's where it's at. I mean, that's really where it's at. And that's even why I go back to the emotional stability. It's like, you know, one of the most interesting stats I've seen around marriage is this whole what happens to couples who have been in a committed relationship for 2 years, right? Where in this stat, it suggests that the divorce rate is basically half of whatever the divorce rate is. It plummets, right? But when you investigate it, the reason why is because in that 2-year time span, there's been some severe adversity, and you've been able to witness how your partner reacts to that adversity, right? And that lets you know how emotionally stable they are, and therefore how compatible they are with you, right? And this is why, it goes back to this whole, there really is an equation around wisely choosing a partner. You know what I mean? There's an equation around this, and and that's why the work that we do is so incredibly important.
It is. I mean, I think we have like a whole program to teach people that stuff. Yeah. Okay. So after value setting, then we put down our goals.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about values, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's just simply around creating the goals, right? If you will, within those values. So for example, for me, going back maybe 3 years, right before we moved to the UK, my goal wasn't, I want to move to the UK and have television shows. Like, that wasn't it. The goal was, I want to travel with my family. You know what I mean? That was the goal, right? And then once that becomes the goal, you begin to, people will say the universe conspires for you, or you could say God moves for you, whatever you want to be. But that will happen, right? That will happen. And so that was what took place. A matter of fact, fascinating story is before I got the opportunity for SelebsGo Dating, which was in 2018, July of 2018, we were going to move to Jamaica for 3 months. Our plan was to go to Jamaica. We were homeschooling our boys, so we said, we'll just homeschool them from Jamaica. We'll live, on a beach, in Jamaica, and we literally packed our bags, packed them. My wife had boxes right everywhere, packed them, and then got the call for London, and then just pivoted towards London. We had already, think about that. We had created our values. We had established our goals of we're going to travel together. We had started to make efforts towards it. That's the execution. That's stepping out on faith. Like we're the efforts, right? We're going to Jamaica, cleared the space 3 months, had someone to come in to rent the house, blah, 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 blah. End up going to, get this incredible gig in London, which has now opened up multiple doors. So that has been the system that's worked for me. And when I look at the biggest breaks I've had in my career, they've all resembled that. It hasn't been a premeditated. The opportunity wasn't premeditated. It was, we created the space
for that
was
opportunity
what was premeditated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you allowed the opportunity. You welcomed the opportunity when it came. I think there's been many instances in my life where opportunities have come, and I'm like, I don't know if I want. I don't know how this fits into the values that I have, or the goals that I have for my family. And I think that I think that's very interesting. And I think you always have to go back to that. How often do you and your wife look back at your family's goals and value system? Do you think? This is a good one. All these are good ones. One of the things that we do is we spend a significant amount of time together. Amount of time together. And in that time, we're covering everything. Right? We're covering what's happening with the boys' school. We're covering what's happening with business. We're covering what's going on the trip, etc. Right? And so once again, that's creating the space so that we can all often have those interactions. I've noticed with a lot of folks is that less time. I always say less time on task means the task crumbles, right? The project crumbles. And that's the same with relationships. I think it's the same with marriage. If we didn't spend a significant amount of time together, right? I really feel like questions like this, revisiting goals would have to be scheduled and it would become regimented. Whereas
And by the way, we spend a lot of time together because we figured out that that's how we grow together. Like we saw
you
we
both also don't have office jobs, right?
Right, but exactly. But we chose that. You know what I mean?
Of course,
like we opted into that because she did have an office job. I did have an office job. And we decided that the life based on our values, that office jobs wouldn't permit that, right? There was a time where, and this is I'll never forget this is, my wife was requesting time off. She had the time, she had, like 4 weeks of vacation. And she requested like some small, like 3 or 4 days she requested. And just because the boss, we felt the boss felt a certain way, said, no, I'm not going to give you that time. You have to take it. And that was the moment where we realized we can't live life like this, and we need to figure out another way. And I don't want to talk from a place of privilege, like, we just, and that was it, because we did some crazy things. Trust me. Like we did some crazy things where we we spent months without paying a mortgage. We were robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you know what I mean.
I get what you mean.
So we went through that, but the reason why is because the time together is what we valued more than anything.
Right. That's a privilege. I don't know if my husband and I can. My husband and I, we spend a lot of time together because of COVID now, right? But we have negotiated time away from each other as well. Like we're like, I can't be with you. Like I need 2 hours away from you every day. I will say that my husband and I, we subscribe to. I don't know if you know Dr. Terry Orbeck. Do you know her?
Yeah, I know Terry. Yeah,
she's great. She has this amazing book called How to Make a Good Marriage Great. I think that's the title. Anyway, in one of the things there, she talks about maintenance talk. To have non-maintenance talk every day with your spouse is a sign that it's a really good tool to make your marriage go the distance, right? That's from all her research and social sciences, okay? And so one of the things, oh my God, George and I are obsessed with this. Like we do it every day. We do 15 minutes. I mean, we don't sit there with a stopwatch. In the beginning though, when we learned it, we're like, okay, 15 minutes. So basically you have to do 10 to 15 minutes a day, I believe, of not maintenance talk. That's where you basically talk to your spouse or your partner about nothing about work, the house, the kids. That is very hard for many couples. For my husband and I, what we did is we learned, okay, we have our own hobbies. We have our own podcasts that we listen to. We have the books that we read. And then what we do is every day at dinner time or after we put the kids to sleep, we'll actually usually spend about an hour just talking. Like yesterday, I don't know if have you read the book Luster?
No.
Oh my God, it's like incredible. So I'm reading it now. I'm like halfway through, and like last night after the kids went to sleep, I was like telling my husband like, oh my God, so like listen to this, and like the book is happening, and like that is part of non-maintenance talk because I'm showing my passions. Just like he'll tell me every time Apple does an event when they release a thing, like he'll spend 2 hours talking to me about, like longer than the presentation itself. He'll tell me all about it, and I enjoy it because I get to see my husband passionate about something. We have our own separate hobbies. And it's so good to like come together and talk about this. At the end of the show, you'll hear me say, I always end the show by saying, be lovable, but more importantly, be likable. Because I feel like it's very easy to love someone, right? I could fall in love with a piece of cheesecake, a slice of cheesecake. It doesn't have to be a human, right? It's very easy to fall in love. It is incredibly hard to choose to like someone for the next 30 years of your life. That means that not only do you have to like them, but you also have to be likable. And I think people like miss out on this puzzle piece because I think about I don't want to say names, but I'll think about couples and sometimes I'll say they love each other. He likes her, but I don't know if she likes him. And that is where you see resentfulness, you see competitiveness, you see, that is where physical chemistry can take a nosedive as well. Like there's all these things that are all interconnected. You might have a financial issue that's still going to affect your physical compatibility. Sure. It's all connected. So it's very, I feel like, what you're describing, I think is great. I think it's not about necessarily being scheduled. And in your case, in your wife, you're talking about, we value time together. And so therefore you spend that time together and you reevaluate your goals and what kind of life you're going to be providing for your children. And I think that what you're also doing has been proven to be success in relationships by the work of Dr. Terry Orthodox, who, she's the one that studied all those couples in 1984, and she's continued to follow them. I think I'm gonna have her as a guest in a few weeks, so I want to let her talk about her story. But yeah, that's just I just want to validate what you're saying in a way.
Thank.
Throw a mirror up to it is what I'm saying.
Time is it's all about time. All about time.
Well, Paul, it was really lovely to have you here. Where can people find you to, if they want to communicate or follow you? Where can I send people to?
I'm real simple. I'm at Paul C. Brunson on all your favorite platforms, with the exception of TikTok, but I'll be there at some point.
Don't get on it. Like, I'm on it, and man, it's such a distraction. I have to put a timer on it. It's awful. I love TikTok. I absolutely love TikTok, but oh my God, is it it just sucks you in?
Yeah, I see it. I see my wife. I see my boys. That algorithm on TikTok
Genius.
Is a beast. Oh my God.
Yeah, I have people who
really
will watch. They'll watch one of my videos, and then I can see that they'll watch all of the rest of them. And I've calculated that's 3 hours worth of content that they'll sit and watch in one sitting, because I'll see how they like it. And then they'll write in a comment, I can't believe I just spent 2 hours watching all of your videos. And I'm like, I can't believe you just did that. What?
No, I'd say on a super nerdy point is I was talking to a CMO of a company earlier who they said that the biggest shift of their budget is allocating towards TikTok, influencers, etc.
Even
TikTok podcasting.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Shows are being commissioned just on TikTok. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
crazy
again,
good.
Paul, I'm going to include the link to find you in the episode notes for anyone who wants to follow and communicate with Paul. Again, thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to Ask a Matchmaker. As you may already know, every other episode is a hotline episode. That's where you call in and we talk one-on-one about, whatever you want to talk about, although usually that conversation revolves around dating and relationships. To get on the hotline, follow me on Instagram at Matchmaker Maria. That's where I post the links, and we will chat then. Until then, you can learn more about what I do or enroll in an upcoming Agape Intensive by visiting agapematch.com/services. Thank you again for listening to Ask a Matchmaker. Be lovable, and more importantly, be likable. See you next week.